This is an exciting moment. It is going live today at Just Reality. Many of you do know this next guest. She needs no introduction, but I'm going to start first with picture a world where misconceptions crumble, trust is restored, and the key to the robust health lies not in a pill bottle, but in the embrace of whole being, a constructive navigational system through which mindful principles fall. And that is why exactly we brought Dr. Suzie Carmack in today. She is not only mindful, she's creative, and she's motivational. So welcome to Adjusted Reality live on Forbes on 5th.
What an honor to be here. I am having my own adjusted reality, realizing that I get to speak with you and to be part of the movement that you've created through your work, the book, the podcast, all of it, and to be in such an iconic space to do so. It's this, my inner child grew up in Pittsburgh is still in the space of pinching myself, but truly honored to be here. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure. The energy, I think, that really brings forth the people together, as we spoke in our first podcast with Dr. Sean Drake, was people find each other through the energy, wisdom, and the ability to say yes. And that's exactly what you did when we met at a sitar in international yoga. It's the International Association of Yoga Therapists.
Yes.
And that's where I met you, and you teach. You do a lot of public speaking, and you were telling me that you love teaching. It's a place of creativity too, to get the students to hear what you say. Can you share a little bit about where you have taught, and a little bit where your life's journey is right now?
Thank you so much. So again, thank you for the honor of being here. And I could keep going in my expression of gratitude, but I'll behave myself here. So I'm honored that I actually retired recently from my work in higher education. I'm literally teary-eyed with joy, so you'll have to I'm going to have a real moment here. So I was most recently, and at the conclusion of that amazing journey, I was the department chair and full professor of yoga therapy at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. And so I led graduate programs, training folks to deliver yoga not as a group or even class experience, but as a tailored, customized intervention to transform the whole ecosystem, which is what I like to call it, the soma, the mind, body, heart, and spirit, the whole being, to use your wonderful framing, and to think about how we can map what is and isn't needing adjustment in that space. So they continue to have that program grow and expand. But in my own shifts within, I realized that I am called to share these tools in various places. And so that has me bringing this work to organizations and even government agencies to help them to connect to their truth within, to be able to optimize that and then share that, not only for productivity, not just what we're doing, but as the cliche goes, how we're being as we do it.
I love that you look into the future, and you've done so in several of your books that you have written, which is where do we want to go and how do we want to get there, but let's take action. And that's really the key to why I wanted you to be at Forbes on 5th with me, is we're taking action today to launch something beautiful in its whole being care, because what we do know is the system has unfortunate flaws in it, and burnout and compassion fatigue are becoming more and more common. And I do love that you're prevention first, optimization, and then alleviation. We don't want you to get to that place, but why do you think so many people are really running on empty, and what does that look like in your world?
Well, it's interesting that along my path in higher education, I actually taught in the public health space. And when we design a health campaign or a program, whether it's for an entire, kind of national level or down to the individual, we oversimplify it, which is both practical and sometimes not fair, by saying, okay, what are we doing here ultimately? What problem are we solving? Are we trying to prevent further things from happening and be the hole in one that no one saw because we don't even know what we prevented? Making it hard to measure, by the way. Are we trying to manage something we recently discovered? Or are we trying to provide healing comfort physically, mentally, emotionally, even as dis-ease trajectory is not changeable. And I'll be transparent here, as I always am, which is that I have my own chronic diseases, even as I'm helping others with theirs. And as a survivor and as someone who has some conditions that aren't going away in this lifetime, I think it's important for us to identify what is the space that is optimal, and to not only think of that as the lack of, but as this ongoing treatment. And so I've seen, and I'm inspired by the clients I've worked with, where sometimes there's a medical challenge that isn't going away, and they still have an amazing quality of life and are some of the most inspirational and inspiring people you'll ever meet. And without meaning to come off judgmentally, but more in the observation space, there's folks that maybe have a clear medical chart and are not tapped into their optimal potential, not only performativity of productivity and all of that kind of optimization lingo, but more so in what are we really trying to do here in this lifetime, and what impact are we trying to make for each other. One of the things that I'll kind of explain where that all comes from and why I've been so committed to helping people to open up and expand their understanding of what yoga is generally and yoga therapy is specifically, is because it's interesting that the ancient yogis were only doing practices, behaviors like mindfulness or postures or however we frame them today. They weren't for their own sake. They were actually tools to be able to align mind, body, heart, and spirit so that they could show up with their dharma, their purpose in this lifetime, to be of service. It's a very humble space of being able to check in within oneself, to notice what is or isn't having lack of ease, and to then address it, whether it's at that pebble place or the full house place of where that problem lies. So long answer to your question, but I think it's really about helping people to understand what zone they are in the problem, preventing it, managing early diagnosis, or embracing that this is happening and we can still have optimal living. And then going from there on what that looks like in a way that involves the client, or in healthcare patient, and isn't only prescriptive, but is inviting them to be co-creating that plan.
It is actually one of the reasons why in Adjusted Reality in Chapter 4 we bring this up, because we want to really infuse the fun movement into your day, the boosting of productivity and well-being, and we bring you back on page 89 with Dr. Suzie Carmack, because she is the author, and we're at Forbes at 5th, and she should be celebrated for the Genius Break, mindfulness, movement, and meaning. And I want you to sit there and think for yourself, when was the last time you sat quietly with yourself and started thinking about the mindful ways to which you live your day? She said it so beautifully. It's alignment. And chiropractors really work hard on alignment, but we also understand, reflect on agency. How do we get you to be the best you? Because you are the first person that needs to move your day along. And with that being said, a lot of that comes from your book and how you have taken yoga in such a beautiful direction. But yoga's not just about flexibility, which a lot of people think, oh, well, I don't know about yoga because I'm not very flexible. But the truth is so much more on the impact for your mental health and your emotional balance. And I think a lot of people overlook that. What do you think?
Yes. Yes, and I'm, exclamation points that we can't see but are all filling up the room. It is interesting that I came into yoga as a busy single mom, someone who was very much interested in serving in all the ways that I was living, very externally focused. And I realized, through a lot of, self-reflection, and yes, I'll say that word, growth, that yes, that's part of my calling. And the yoga concept of sadhana, which is basically a daily practice of checking in within oneself and then finding those tweaks that may be minor and only some deep breaths are needed to recalibrate, or to discover something through interoception, the process of understanding our function, like, when you're hungry, when you need to use the restroom. But it's so much more than that kind of mechanical functions of the body. It's also checking in with ourselves, with inquiry. What does my mind need right now? What does my emotional heart space need right now? What does my spirit need right now? And then doing what we can to acknowledge that, to allow that without judgment. And yes, have a practice that flows naturally out of that self-inquiry. And then to get on it, as you said, I'm very much about action with myself and my clients, because there is so much benefit when we can make what behavior change geeks like me say small steps lead to long journeys. So all of that, but I do want to kind of tether that it's understandable that if you Google yoga today, yes, you will see people, middle-aged women on beaches, and here I am, and I was part of that discourse for many years. And I think part of that comes from we can't physically take a picture of the inner landscape discovery that we do. And so some people think of, yoga as having to be at a studio or what have you, or being in a posture. But I would say anyone that has the ability to check in with themselves and anchor into what's true for them, and then to go after what they need to do to align that, and to not ignore themselves, but to not get caught up in themselves, that's where they start showing up in service, and spirit, takes the wheel. But it all comes from that moment of noticing, and as Ellen Langner says, mindfulness is just anything that isn't mindless. And so we can give that gift to ourselves. So Genius Breaks was my way of sharing with the public a simple framework of, hey, let's check in with the day. Let's see if mindfulness, movement, or meaning, which is basically creating new self-narratives in that inner space, mantras, intentions, whatever word connects for people, but it's essentially coming from a very ancient practice of where yoga's roots were thousands of years ago.
Beautifully said. Ellen Langer was on Adjusted Reality, and her mindful reset was really, as a Harvard professor and written 20 plus books, and while we're sitting in the epitome of authorship and beauty and love and trying to get a message out, I think back to some of the things that Ellen said, that you need to be and find yourself in chronic happiness. And it's such a powerful thing to say, chronic happiness, because it's an everyday thing and you get to choose.
Yes.
That's the beauty of this, and that's why we're here with you today, because you chose to be here with us, and you coined some really fun terms before we went live on the air today. We talked about this very special look at burnout protection plan, but there was also the superhero syndrome, and I want you to touch base on those two for our audience today.
Well, again, pinching myself that we're in this space together. And as an author, I wrote my first book, Wellbeing Ultimatum, before Genius Breaks. Of course, I didn't know I'd be doing that later. And it actually was this critical standpoint in my life where I felt drawn to write these ideas that had been really emerging in my work with clients, and to solidify that in a framework that people could pull from, not in a paint by numbers kind of way, but in a way to help them to structure their approach to it, which is what frameworks ultimately do. That folks sometimes think theory is not practical, when actually it's the most practical, because it gives us a way to think about how we think. So in any case, when I finally made the choice to write it, I wanted to create a kind of a connection with the reader. As you know, because you've done such amazing work, that's difficult. You're having a conversation that is not spoken, but you're trying to kind of meet the person where they are. And so to describe the phenomena of folks who are servant-led, service-oriented, even servant leaders, who are so committed to what they do, who are called to do this in this lifetime, who will answer that calling in a moment's notice. Let's think about how superheroes operate. They answer the call 24/7. They have superpowers, and they're not doing it because they want people to notice them. They're all about the work and about the solving those problems that they're built to solve. And so I use that as a iconic metaphor to be able to explain that, of course, those who are in that deep connection with their spiritual journey and with their higher calling, of course, we sometimes forget that we are but humans. We never saw Wonder Woman having to take a nap. We never saw Superman needing to stop in the middle of something to play with his kids. But and I'm not a superhero or comic strip expert, so if I'm getting anything wrong, please correct me at some point. But the point I was trying to make is that those of us who are called to what we do, we've got to be careful we don't get so lost in that effort that we forget that our human system, the vehicle that carries this mind, body, heart, spirit around, this soul around, really, is a functioning machine, no different than a car. It needs to pull over, it needs gas, it needs to be taken care of. And so I use that metaphor to come into the space of helping people to realize that burnout prevention, well-being optimization are really a continuum, and that's all connected into the human performance system that is much like every car is different, and it acts and has different needs based on how you drive it. Each of us have a different performance system that needs to be serviced. And as someone who knows all too well, if I don't pull over for gas, that's going to cause bigger problems. It was a way to help people to tap into that internal space of understanding and to then think about what actions they need to be able to take care of that system.
It's really fundamental as we sit here today and we start looking at what does it look like for your service manual in your life as you're listening to us right now, because this is really about you. We're doing adjusted reality because the change is now, and the change has to happen by taking action. The first step of action is being able to recognize the framework and the theory, which is your service manual is different. Mine is different than Dr. Carmack's. This is a moment of reflection of where do you want to be in your life, and how are you going to get there? So the internal pharmacy that you'll find in adjusted reality, I'm not going to spoil what that is going to be different for everybody. We're a fingerprint in this world. We're all each walking around in a different world, and we want you to be able to recognize the importance of what you own as your agency to what you grow through your faith, hope, and love, which is that mind, body, spirit, whole being aspect, and it's through alignment. And as we follow up today, I want to first and foremost thank you for integrating so many of the pieces that people need to recognize in their life, Dr. Carmack, but also I want them to also see that there are early warning signs that we often get, but sometimes we don't read the dashboard well. Can you close out today with determining when you see that the gas light is going on? What are some of the things they need to pay attention to?
Well, the idea is to have moments where we take pause. So this is where the Genius Break concept is to pause and notice what's happening, and then to give us a moment to have a micro recalibration, and then to move out on whatever's needed from there. The Wellbeing Ultimatum strategy framework is helping people to really think big picture about their whole system and what needs to happen in the long term, much like we take care of those vehicles, as I was saying before. So I think what I can say is that the ultimate message I'd like folks to know from a burnout prevention, well-being optimization standpoint is that it isn't only behavioral. It's the things you mentioned, hope and faith. And for me, those, both the science and my own lived experience would say that those don't only happen in our personal kind of ability to reorganize ourselves or to align ourselves. We've got to connect. And my dissertation showed that social support predicts well-being. It was such a strong finding that my mentors asked me to run the math again because the relationship was so strong. And this was back in 2014. And so what I say in Wellbeing Ultimatum is that it's not only self-care, which is really self-leadership, and what we're doing for ourselves, that only goes so far. As my mother said, the world doesn't revolve around you. And she said that with love to me, right, as I was growing up. And she's absolutely right. We need, as humans, connection with each other. We need times when we can be what I call backstage, like we are here, although we're also on stage, to be able to feel like we can say what's really going on. And we're not trying to perform externally, but we can be real with someone else and be witnessed. And we need help sometimes from professionals, and professionals need help too. And so that's what I would say, is that we don't have to do it alone. Burnout happens as a systems level challenge. So that means that we need to not only show up for ourselves, but to be open and willing to be able to give and receive help to each other.
Well said, well said. And it reminds me of Dwayne Dwyer's quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Today we're here at Forbes on 5th. We're launching Adjusted Reality. Couldn't think of a better guest to have with me today in Adjusted Reality. We're both in a namaste moment. I'll tell you what, Adjusted Reality is here for you. It's Supercharge Your Whole Being for optimal living and longevity. And stay tuned, because we're continuing this whole day to bring you a better future, a hopeful, more inspired way of looking at your health and the things that you want to change. All right, keep with us. We'll be right back.